cooking. So we've got a lot of knowledge and experience up here, and without further ado, I'd like to present Mr. Manish Jain.
Thank you, Maria. Small announcement, but very important announcement. So in our speaker's lounge, there was a zip bag, small bag. It has medicine, which has medicine. Please, anybody find it or found it, please put it there on the table in where the found and lost box is there. You found it? Color? White and black. Very important medicine. That is the only reason. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Hello? Can you hear me? No? Hello? Oh. Okay. Can I maybe invite those in the back to kind of come up in front a little so it's a little bit more cozier and get a little intimate? So I'm really grateful for the opportunity from all of you to share some of my experiences, and feeling a little bit nervous with such, particularly this old hairy guy sitting there with a big mustache. But lots of people I deeply respect and admire in this gathering. So I thought I'd just start whenever my grandmother told me, whenever you feel nervous, have some fun, make some masti, as we say in Hindi. So I thought we'll do a little game to start. Can everyone just stand up a second? So this game is called Salam Namaste. Does everyone know what Namaste means? Right? The divine being in me bows to the divine being in you. And Salam means peace be upon us all. So it's called Salam Namaste. So I just want you to look to, a lot of times what happens is that in this modern industrial life, we forget who our neighbors are. Sultan was just talking about our neighbors of the earthworms and the microorganisms, and so there's a lot of microorganisms and earthworms around us also. So just give a quick Salam Namaste to all your neighbors, front, back, up, down, left, right, wherever you see them. Salam Namaste. And I'll take Maria as my little demo. Yes, quickly. Okay. All right. So we're going to, and try to look each other in the eyes. Can give a little smile. And so the next one is a little different Salam Namaste. It's a high five Salam Namaste, all the way from New York. Salam Namaste. To give it. All right. So the next one is a little bit of a tricky one. It's knee to knee, Salam Namaste. So knee to knee, Salam Namaste. Try not to break anyone's kneecaps while you're at it. All right. And the next one, you ready? Watch out. Salam Namaste. Claude is really enjoying this one. Okay, and the last one. We have something in India called the Jadoo Ki Jappi. It's the magic hug. So give a Jadoo Ki Jappi to all the people around you. Salam Namaste. So, you can sit down. How is that feeling? Everyone feeling good? Okay, I feel a little more relaxed, kind of. So as I think about it, people ask me, how did I end up here? So I often wonder. So what happened to me, I was in these in my 20s, I was in these, wanting to serve the world, serve the planet, serve humanity. And then I ended up in these 3 global centers of power, Wall Street, Harvard, and the UN, World Bank. And after working with them, you can't hear me. I can hear me. Okay. Hello? 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 No? There's an echo coming here. Hello? If you come closer, I can just scream. I'm pretty loud. People tell me I'm a loud mouth. Huh? Sing a little? Oh, then the hall will empty out. So, all right. So, being in those different places, I went there and I thought, let us see. I used to believe that the key to solving the world's problems was good education. And so I went and tried to see if I could fix the education from all of these major places, education system in many different countries. And I started to see more and more that rather than a solution, education was actually the problem. That so much of the mindsets that we have, that's weird. Is that, okay. So much of the mindsets that we see around the planet, this mindset of being a parasite kind of thing. And it's no offense to the parasites that actually exist in nature, but we are a worse kind of parasite, has been created by the culture of factory schooling. And what happened? Oh, I thought he was shouting at me. Sorry. Okay. Yeah. So, and the more I got into those systems, the more I saw that schooling was one of the main drivers that was creating this mindset around the world of consumption, of waste, of, so I used to see that, if we think about, who's wasting more water on the planet, educated people or uneducated people? Who's creating more pollution on the planet? Educated, yeah, uneducated. Who's eating more junk food on the planet? Educated or uneducated? So the obvious answer is obviously the educated people. So there's something really fundamentally wrong when we think that education is actually expanding our consciousness. I started to see that it's dumbing us down. And we're actually losing our deeper sense of who we are and how we're relating to the world. I also started to feel very deeply that the entire system was rigged. The game is rigged. And the odds, the way it's set up, is all stacked against us. So at age 28, I had kind of a deep existential crisis and massive disillusionment. And I learned at that time actually that there's a tremendous transformative potential that happens when we go through deep disillusionment. And maybe it's a tool that we need to explore more on the planet. I think many of you, maybe older farmers who use pesticides and chemicals, had that deep disillusionment, so that's probably why you're sitting here as well. So I would like to, for the purpose of our time together, I'd like to ask you to suspend judgment and consider this possibility that factory schooling might be the greatest crime against humanity that we've ever known. And that the demise, if there is a demise of the planet, will not happen because of the Monsantos, the Coca-Cola, and the Vedantas, but because of well-intentioned teachers and schools, and people who think that we can fix the system. So the appeal, I'll put my cards right on the table right now, is the appeal is that actually we need not to just tweak around or tinker around with the existing system. Since yesterday we are hearing how serious the situation is for humanity and for life on the planet. And what I'm inviting is actually that we start to radically redesign, use the principles of permaculture, work with those, to actually redesign how we see our learning system. And I would say to you one thing, that here's another proposition for you, is that what we do to our children, we will do to the earth. So today we are talking about Claude, Vandana, yesterday we're all saying, you know, biodiversity and seeds and soil. But I think we've outsourced our children. And this outsourcing of our children means that we have lost track of what's the soil that they're growing up in. And we're expecting this institution called schooling, which actually by its design, the same people who designed the school system, designed the factory system, the prison system, the military system, but the same design, right? And I did some work in Udaipur jail. When you actually walk in, you can't differentiate a school and a jail, except for the sign. The look, the feel, the cement, concrete cages that people are kept on are very similar to the cages of children are kept in. So I want to just tell a little story, if you let me. Can you put that photo? It's a story that I yeah. So it's an adapted story that I did, I Indianized it. It's called The Animal School in India. So once upon a time, the animals in the forest decided they must do something serious to meet the problems of a new world order. So they asked the government to organize a school for them as part of their right to education. They were tired of being called uncivilized, uneducated, and unintelligent, and ranked at the bottom of the United Nations indicators. They had adopted an activity curriculum consisting of running, climbing, swimming, and flying. It was compulsory that all the animals took all the subjects and followed the same timetable, because it was very important to them that no animal be left behind. To ensure that the students were progressing satisfactorily, standardized achievement tests were administered to all of them. The duck was excellent in swimming, in fact better than his instructor, but he made only passing grades in flying and was very poor in running. Since he was slow in running, he had to go for extra tuition, extra tutoring, and also drop swimming in order to practice running. This was kept up until his web feet were badly worn out, and he became only average in swimming. But average was acceptable in school as long as he was obedient. So nobody was worried about that except the duck, who lost his passion and motivation for swimming. He now longed for a stable government job, so he decided to apply for a low-level post in the army. But the queue to join was very, very long. So thus he spent most of his time preparing various government entrance examinations. The rabbit started at the top of the class in running, but she had a nervous breakdown because so much makeup work in swimming and flying. Her parents were desperate for her to join a high-powered coaching center in Kota, this is where I'm from, Rajasthan, so that she could become an engineer and get a good marriage prospect. She attempted suicide because of all the pressure. The squirrel was excellent in climbing until he developed frustration in the flying class, where his teacher made him start from the ground up instead of the treetop down. He developed an inferiority complex and felt a lot of anger and shame towards his parents and local culture. The education system taught him that his mother was uneducated. He stopped speaking his own language and wanted to learn perfect accented English so he could leave the forest and get a call center job in Hyderabad, which he was told was more exciting than his boring village. The kingfisher bird was a problem child and was oftentimes disciplined severely by his teachers. He was diagnosed as hyperactive because he refused to sit quietly in class and given the drug Ritalin. In the climbing class, he beat all the others to the treetop, but insisted on using his own way to do it. The teachers did not appreciate his creative thinking and put him in a special electrified detention cage with a behavioral modification program. They labeled him a slow learner. He failed out of school and was unemployed for some time. He could not see his own special gifts. Eventually, he became a powerful local gunda, this is thug, who was controlled by a corrupt politician. At the end of the year, an abnormal eel could swim exceedingly well and also run, climb, and fly a little. He could also quote a lot of TED talks. He had the highest average and was made valedictorian. He became very arrogant, super competitive, and distanced himself from the other animals. He decided to sell all his family lands to a mining contractor so that he could continue his studies abroad, Australia maybe. He later suffered from lots of anxiety attacks and depression due to expectations to be the best and to get things perfect all the time. Wanting to distance themselves from the riffraff, the elephants decided to start an alternative private school, which had a state-of-the-art infrastructure, including iPads, CCTV cameras, Adidas uniforms, and followed the IB curriculum. It was fully branded. This became very elite and expensive, so the other parent animals, were forced to take on loans in order to join. The children who attended all grew up in a bubble and could no longer adapt to life in the jungle. In the end, they no longer saw the sacred forest as their home. They preferred living in cement cages and auditoriums. They no longer could imagine living, learning, or even having fun without paying money for it, or having a course, or Google, or an expert to teach them how to do it. They no longer saw themselves as part of nature and became disconnected from its deeper wisdom and intuition. They forgot who they really are. So I want to just really, all of these animals, you see them there. I know thousands of kids like them. Come across them every day. There's one beautiful one here, sitting right here. Saqib, can you wait? This is Saqib. So, Saqib, I think, well, one I should say, I have to put on, this is a little side, I have to put on my Indian grandmother hat for a second. Saqib, he's a beautiful guy, he's single, he's looking for a beautiful partner. If you know, just hook him up. But Saqib has an amazing journey. He actually grew up as an orphan on the street. And when he was put into a class, when he was in class 1, he told me he couldn't make sense of things. He used to rip up his textbook, which is probably why he's in a permaculture conference. But after he basically was labeled all of those horrible labels, and he quit school after class 8. So I met him a few years ago, and he was really, we have a project in Delhi called the Creativity Adda. So we put a unschool 4 hours a day in the middle of a government school. The kids are coming there, they're free to explore themselves, learn on their own. But so Sakib ended up there somehow and has become an amazing person. He's been with Narsama volunteering here for the last 6 months for the IPC, done an incredible amount of work and learned permaculture. He's an awesome musician, drummer. He's an awesome clown and actor. And he's an awesome upcycler and designer of things. So I'm really, really honored and proud to know him as a being. And huh?
Can we see him?
Yeah, he's here. This beautiful guy here. Yeah. So, and he's managed, most importantly, his own sense of the wild. He's a wild dude, and he's maintained that. So schooling wasn't able to kill it for him. So I think the story is not as depressing as I told, but there is really. Thanks. You want to say something? Okay. Give me a hug. All right. Good. Then I said he's single. Awesome dude. If you know anyone, pick him up. Huh? Yeah. Okay. So, anyways, what? So I wanted to just talk about a little bit for the story. I wanted to just share that we are in a much deeper crisis than we can imagine. It's an existential crisis, really, about who we are. And I think the damage schooling is doing is not just about the content we're being taught. It's a damage that is at a psychological, a biological, spiritual level that we need to start to grapple with if we want to take this, if we want to do something seriously in this world together. So I guess the question that I'm holding is, can permaculture help us find our way back home? Can it help us? I believe the answer is yes. That's why I'm standing here. So, but can it help us find the courage to heal ourselves from the damage that has been done by the animal school? Can it help us find the courage to walk out of the existing systems and start to rethink and reimagine them and redesign them? I believe that it can, but I think that the challenge is not to just sit and think that we can, as I said, add on to the existing thing. So I'm really, for me, permaculture is not just about the agriculture, right? It's about all of our social systems. And I think the last 2 days, there's lots of amazing things about the soil and seed, but something about the larger philosophy, I think, and the design principles that we need to kind of tap into and connect to it at a deeper intuitive level. And to think about, because I think that, how we see things, how we observe things, how we listen to things makes a big difference in how we design, right? How we sit together makes a big difference in how we design. Where we sit together makes a big difference in design. Whether there are certificates or exams makes a difference in how we relate to each other. So I think the idea of design has to go much deeper. We cannot just put these ideas and think we're gonna, so form is like important, right? So it's not like we can keep the same forms that we're using and put different content in it and think that everything's going to be okay, right? So that's why it's such an honor to talk with people who actually understand this much more deeply. But I think that there's I forgot to mention this, but one of the reasons also I came back to India 20 years ago was that I started feeling that I needed to spend time more with my village grandmother, who's illiterate, so-called illiterate, and with more indigenous people and communities. And I started feeling that because I felt that after spending time with them that they were probably more intelligent than my Harvard professors. And they knew the difference between what I call knowing and being. So we think this is part of the sickness, right? Gandhi talked about this 100 years ago, that the for a genuine education system, you have to have the head, the heart, the hand, and the home. And despite his calls and Tagore's calls and many other calls from around the world, we're still just doing the head pretty much. Right? But I saw that my grandmother was always invoking all of those things. And she was probably living permaculture, even though she didn't attend a PDC. Much more in its deepest spirit. So I think when I look for wisdom of how do we get out of this thing, I would first look at people like my grandmother or all of our grandmothers out there who are maybe still connected to something much deeper. What I wanted to just share, 1 second. So about I wanted to just say also one more thing, that the way we've been conditioned to see the world is that children are not part of our design when we think about spaces. We've created separate space for them. And usually it's a kind of Disneyland type unsustainable space that we create for children. But we have not taken the challenge. When I said we outsource children from our lives, we haven't taken the challenge from children of how do we redesign our spaces so that children can also be deeply reintegrated with us. And I think what I've learned from a lot of people like my grandmother is the spaces have to be intergenerational. You know, that's where if I usually say something like, we need at least 3 generations together for wisdom to reemerge. And they're doing things together and playing together and cooking together and creating the spaces that they have together. So that for me is a very important design principle, is even how do we get really to have our children be part of the way we design our spaces. I mean, schooling segregated everything, right? Otherwise I see, it's interesting, like the traditional house of a potter, for example. So that was his workshop was there. His and her, his wife, their workshop was there. Their learning space was there. And even their birthing space was there. So that was how design was taught. And everything was accessible from childhood. One of our friends, he says that in rural areas, children grew up seeing processes all the time because they were all around them. But in urban areas, children grow up seeing products only. So this is something I think we have to bring back, is this idea of where children fit in all of this. And we stopped creating these spaces separate for children. But if my lecture is too boring for a child, then we need to rethink the whole space and how we do things, you know. And the other thing is this outsourcing of children has helped us that, I mean, I found I have a 15-year-old daughter who has never been to school. Like we take kids to the zoo to see the cage animals, she's gone to schools to see them from how the children are like caged there. But she's never sat in any like classes like that in the school. But I found that after my grandmother, she's been probably the most major influence for me to actually see the world in a very different way. To move outside of this kind of fragmented monoculture mind that schooling created, and to start to see life more holistically. So when we outsource our children, we not only separate them, but we lose the capacity that they have to help feed in us other capacities in ourselves. to help seed in us other ways of knowing and being and seeing the world. So children have that, so they are actually our gurus or our guides. We're not there to teach them anything. We lose that capacity as soon as we send them to these kind of animal schools. So I think that also is something. So, and then there's also this, one other inspiration I wanted to share is this idea of the Gurukul system. Have people heard of that? The guru disciple tradition. So it's been very corrupted. And speaking of corrupted, like I guess the mental model, what I would also put in front of you is when your operating system, since we're in Hyderabad, operating systems everyone knows, right? So when your operating system is corrupted, what do? Throw it away. Reboot it. Change the lineup. Huh? So our operating system, what I would humbly put in front of you is our operating system of education is corrupted. And we need to actually redesign at a more fundamental level. But anyways, what I was saying was, what was I saying before? Yes, good. So the guru disciple system. So I mean, I've looked at it, very different models. Some of them have become corrupted. But there are three essential things in that, which I think are super important to keep in mind if we're thinking about design. So one is the principle of mutuality. Right? Mutuality. There was a deep relation. If Abid, right? Can you stand up one second? So I'm going to tell you now, I've declared I'm master of the universe. I used to think that when I was an investment banker, that's what we were told. Anyways, but Abid is now your guru. Bow down to him. What's the Indian reaction? No. Claude is there. You look at him. People start laughing. Nobody can declare themselves a guru and start imposing themselves on you. Right? There's a mutual, you have to go and find your guru, you connect with them, and then there's a mutual relationship that's built up. So mutuality. It's crazy that we're designing spaces and we respect earthworms, the intelligence of the earthworm and of the soil. But we don't respect the learner to ask them, what do they want? What are they interested in? How do they want to learn? So this is a problem. And so the guru disciple relation starts with mutuality. There's a relationship there of mutual care and trust that's built. The second relationship that was really important is diversity. So there's no one way, there's no one monoculture system that every disciple has to follow. Each one is negotiated and co-created with the disciple. And the third thing is humility. That I think this is one, there's a famous saying which I really love, it's the more I know, the more the more I know about how little I know. So modern education has created this incredible amount of hubris, arrogance, that we know. And I think that's a big danger for us when we, that I think a lot of unlearning has to happen around that we know the answer. So this sacred relationship was always guided in the idea of search for truth. That there's much more to understand and know. And so it's not like we have the answer and we're now trying to just tell everyone the answer, but we are in a continuous relationship of understanding. Okay, so last thing, so I wanted to just share these inspirations, and from out of this we created something 8 years ago called Swaraj University. It's a very unique kind of radical university which is around the idea of self-designed learning. So people come and we call the learners Koji. So Koj means search. So each of us is born with a seed, a search, a deeper purpose, a deeper mission, a deeper connection to life. And so the first purpose of education is needs to help us to understand our own search. What are we here for? Right? What gifts have I come with? How do I manifest that in the world? So each person we design with them their own kind of program. The second really interesting design principle I would say in that is what we call gift culture. So gift culture is this idea that life is not a commodity. Life is not for sale. Life is not really bartering with us, even. That there's a deeper relationship that is there in life, and that there's something much more valuable beyond money. So there's no fees in our university. People don't pay for their learning, right? And I think that's another thing that people, if we create systems where people have to, where fees become the central point and it denies access to that, then we have a deeper problem. And so how do we build this system where we can start to see there's so many gifts and people can come and share their gifts in different ways for building up something like this. The third design principle I would say I would want to share with you is the idea of copyleft. So this idea is that in our university is the more we share knowledge, the more it grows. That we are not owners of life. Right? So this is a fundamental thing that schooling told us, is we own the land, we own the river, we own this knowledge system. It's bullshit. So the more we are all, anything we publish, for example, we put under copyleft. It's there for sharing. And I was a little bit, I've been to many kinds of gatherings, alternative gatherings, where I find it's very disturbing to people who are still in this paradigm of, oh, I can't tell you how this is made because it's copyrighted. So I think we need to come out of that kind of paradigm and start to design spaces where copyleft, sharing of knowledge is how we're going to generate this movement in a different kind of way. And she's going to kill me, I think. So let me just, there's a lot more I could share about Swaraj, but I just want to end it. Yes. Oh, there's a lot I forgot. Anyway, okay, so, and we believe in cheating in our university. Cheating is a good thing, no? When people collaborate, schools call it cheating, right? Yeah. So we believe in collaboration, and we have very diverse. We have people who are doing permaculture, and people who are on their spiritual journeys, and people who are, still making community media films, and they're all doing it together, and they're cheating. So at the end of 2 years, you don't have to do anything, and you know all this stuff, how to do things, because your friends have been doing it along with you, and you're helping them. So, and we believe in that. We say we're not here to compete against each other. We're all here to complete each other. So I'm just going to close with one prayer for the permaculture community, which I feel a part of and deeply indebted to, and 2 invitations. So the deepest prayer is that the permaculture movement does not become a technocratic solution, does not become an academic course, it does not become an exclusive brand, and it does not become a cult or a religion. So this is a prayer I have in a very humble way. And the invitation, there's 3 invitations, very short. Sorry, Maria. Is that okay? What happened to the guy ripping up the time thing? Bring him up here again. Now, come on, where are you? Please. Okay, 3 little humble invitations. So I'm inviting that we stop being happy getting some crumbs from the education system. A little, by crumbs I mean 1 hour here or a little workshop here. The game is something very different, as I've been trying to put in front. And we need to actually think about total redesign of the game. It's not good enough. I don't think that we can build a real permaculture movement unless we radically rethink education. And this is more than just add-ons to the existing system. The second invitation is, I'm inviting that we bring the lenses of decolonization to the permaculture movement. And as part of that, we need to de-romanticize the urban, industrial, consumer lifestyle of the global north. So that's the second invitation. Do it much more. So we do a lot of our work with young people in villages is to de-romanticize this American dream that we've all been fed the nightmare, right? And the third invitation is I'm inviting that we start to see that there are other diverse learning systems out there, like the forest, like the soil, and start engaging them more deeply as we think about redesigning our learning spaces. We must not be afraid to journey back into the wild. Thank you.
Ooh, wow, that was a lot of really, really powerful words, powerful stories, powerful sharing, and I'm really excited that you brought up the word decolonization, because we need it here in the conference. We need to make sure to have those conversations, and I actually wanted to ask folks during lunchtime as we're waiting online, maybe some folks want to hang around here a little bit, maybe de-school and decolonize together and make use of our time. The next session starts at 12:15, so do folks want to ask questions for 5 minutes and then just run to your next workshop, or? Yeah, okay. Oh.
So it's Swaraj, S-W-A-R-A-J, and we started something called the Ecoversities Network. So it's 100 radical universities around the world which are radically changing vision of higher education, and it's in about, I think, 40 different countries. So welcome to share more about that with you if you're interested.
Well, let's ask that.
Go ahead.
Sure. First of all, I'm really happy to hear Ivan Illich's concept of de-schooling being discussed here, so that's really wonderful. If I could just ask you to return to your prayer, and maybe to talk about what you see as why there might be a need to de-school permaculture, and what might be the warning signs around that, and also what that kind of de-schooling might entail.
Oh, can you come to the microphone, Manish? Or
So one thing that Maria didn't say about me, which is I'm really see myself as a convener of intercultural and interspecies dialogue. And so I think this is the thing. One of the things is when there are so many diverse ways of knowing, right? And some of them have come together and built these principles called permaculture. But how does this movement relate to the diversity? I mean, it's a beautiful thing that so many different kinds of, they're not branded permaculture movements, but they're here from around India. I think the question is not just inviting them here as a token gesture, but actually, or even giving them a space to speak on the stage. But what is that deeper dialogue that is going to happen between them? How is it going to be? One of my friends says deep dialogue is about chiseling the other and yourself, together. So is there a space for that, for all of the different kinds of different streams, and particularly, I mean, the indigenous knowledge systems that exist around there? What is the space for really listening and engaging with those, and not romanticizing them in any way, but really, tuning into those and the deeper wisdom and intelligence they offer. Also, I think, again, this space we're looking at, right? This is a classroom. We are very good, and we have to be very careful that we are good at reproducing the master's tool. Right? That's why you're all, people who take courses, academic courses all the time, are become very good at reproducing those tools. So the microphone is a tool. The way we're sitting is a tool. That's why for some people it doesn't matter, but you guys are designers. Or we all are designers. So then it matters, right? This is the form. This is how we relate to each other. So I think some of those levels, and then the level of, what we call the brand, the certification, all of those things, again, become part of this thing that we have to look very deeply for. So I can see the very genuine need to maintain some idea of quality, some kind of depth and rigor to the whole process. But we have to really ask, is that, because this is something that Ivan Illich had raised, does this kind of labeling and certification, does it create exclusion? Does it build scarcity? Right? The abundance of this country and of the global South to contribute to this movement is humongous. But if you start building certifications and this, you're going to build systems of artificial scarcity. And so I think we need to look at some of those things as well. Just a little bit of things too. And where are the kids? Why do we have to design spaces without 3 generations together at least?
Thank you, Manish. Manish got some. We actually have to shift.
And where are the trees?
We have to shift to the next session because we only have 5 minutes. So again, I'm just going to repeat. If you have questions, I'm sorry, please write them down so we can pass them and make sure that they get posted up. And also, please feel free to approach any of the presenters to have those personal conversations. Thank you so much, Manish, for all that you've shared. Yeah. And again, if folks do want to continue the conversation around deschooling and decolonization, this is very informal, it's not on the program. But if folks want to come and meet up here on stage at 1 o'clock while waiting to get online for lunch, let's just take that step. Okay? So thanks. Please head to your next session. The next person who will be speaking here will be Starhawk. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Manishji. Thank you so much. And last year I attended North American Permaculture Convergence in San Francisco. So I attended that conference, convergence, not conference. So one of my friend and the permaculturist. So while discussing about Indian permaculture movement and all these things, he was asked me, do you know Manish Jain? So then I asked, why did you ask him? I heard about him, but I haven't met him. No, I think you people should meet. I think he is a person who is doing a lot of alternate education, Shikshantar and the Swaraj University. The meaning itself, Swaraj, is education, alternative lifestyle, and the youth, those who are looking for in search of employment and some education. I think this is one of the best alternative university. Thank you so much for working for that kind of children and youth. Thank you, Manish Jain. Thank you so much. Yeah, one of his students is here. Please stand up. One of his students is there. Okay. Abhiram is here. No. Yeah, udhar. Okay. Now I invite, already you have a timetable in your hand, but still I invite Starhawk for the talk, and she is known as Star of Permaculture. She is one among the best teachers in the world. She teaches, she sings also. We'll see in our closing ceremony, the closing ceremony song, one of the beautiful songs last time I heard. there in California, North American Permaculture Convergence, which is the power of the permaculture. Please come on to the dais, Starhawk. Thank you so much. Please.
Hello, everybody. That is a wonderful name. Oh, I printed up copies. So, hello, everybody. It's really a tremendous honor and privilege to be able to be here and speak with you all today. And so now I'm going to get introduced.
Sorry about that. We're also trying to get some copies that Starhawk wants to provide for everyone. So if you don't already know who Starhawk is the author or co-author of 13 books, including the classics The Spiral Dance, her visionary novel The Fifth Sacred Thing, and its sequel City of Refuge, and her book on social permaculture, The Empowerment Manual, a guide for collaborative groups. She wrote and co-directed the documentary Permaculture, The Growing Edge, and travels internationally, lecturing and teaching. Starhawk directs Earth activist training, teaching permaculture design, grounded in spirit and with a focus on organizing and social permaculture. She did her PDC with Penny Livingston Stark in 1997, and holds a double diploma in teaching and design from the Permaculture Institute of North America. On her 40-acre ranch in Northern California, she integrates planned grazing, perennial food forests, and medicinal herbs in an evolving model of carbon ranching. So without further ado, welcome Starhawk. Let's give her a round of applause.
Thank you. As I said, it's really a privilege and an honor to be here with so many incredible people doing so much amazing work around the world, and it makes me hopeful to be able to hear all of these stories and learn so much from being at this gathering. A year ago, I was at a place called Standing Rock in North Dakota, where indigenous people had risen up to protest a pipeline that was planned to go through their land and across sacred lands to carry oil from some very dirty, polluting oil fields and threatening the water supply potentially of something like 10 million people. I don't know how many of you here in India are familiar with that uprising, but it was an amazing effort over months and months to stop the pipeline that came to a place of success, and then as soon as Trump got in office, he rammed it through. It since has been actually stopped because it was ruled that it was pushed through illegally, but oil has flowed through it. At the same time as I was coming here, a similar pipeline in South Dakota leaked 210,000 gallons of oil. So we live in a time where sometimes it feels like our only pleasure in life might be to say, I told you so, as the disasters occur. But I believe that we as permaculturists can do a lot more than that. That we have tremendous tools and insights and perspectives in learning how to address the problem of climate change, and that in fact those tools are just what the world needs in order to move forward and make the tremendous shifts that we need to make. What we have to do, honestly, is not that much. We just have to change our agriculture, our technology, our transport systems, our energy systems, and while we're at it, probably change the governments and the overall economy that goes with it. And what's hard about that? Climate change is forcing us up against the fact that we live in a system that is completely unsustainable. And that's not news to us as permaculturalists. I don't want to spend all my time trying to talk about climate change and how bad it is. I'm going to assume you already know that, or that other people here will tell you that. But I also know we have lived through a summer now of tremendous disasters, even in the United States, where we like to think we're immune from reality. We have had hurricanes, floods, wildfires, tremendous destruction. Exactly what has been predicted about climate change. And it's no longer something that's theoretically in the future. It is something that we are in the midst of. And while it has hit us hard this year in the U.S., where I come from, we have to know and acknowledge that the worst impacts are always going to be on the people in the world who have the least resources and who have done the least to create this problem. So climate change ultimately comes down to a tremendous social justice problem as well. We cannot address climate change unless we address the systems of social injustice. So how do we organize specifically as permaculturalists? Like, what do we have to bring to the table that other groups might not? The first thing, I think, is our set of ethics, that we have an ethical framework. And those ethics, of course, people care, earth care, fair share, I believe are the kinds of ethics that are needed to really address climate change. And again, I'm going to assume you are familiar with the permaculture ethics. I don't have to explain them all to you. But I will say this. One of the things I think is so brilliant about permaculture is that it includes people care and earth care. There are many environmentalists out there who sort of seem to talk and behave as if human beings are a blight on the planet and the planet would be better off without us. That might be true. You could make a case for it. But it is not possible to organize people or motivate people around the idea that the world is better off without them. Just does not happen. To motivate people, we have to value people. And if we value people, we have to believe that we as human beings have the capacity to intervene in systems in a positive way, in a way that can build more biodiversity, in a way that can build more health, in a way that can build more equity for everyone involved in that, not just the humans, but the animals, the plants, the microorganisms, the whole system. And that to me is permaculture's message. It says, yes, as humans we've made tremendous mistakes and tremendous destruction, but we also do have the capacity to function as the earth's healing hands and her appreciative eyes and her warm and loving and compassionate heart. And that is what we're supposed to be about as agriculturalists, as permaculturalists, as decent human beings. The third ethic, fair share, I think is the most subversive and radical one because, of course, the real problem with the world today is that we don't have an ethic of fair share. We have an ethic of tremendous inequality. You know, we have a world right now where in the United States, 3 men own as much wealth as half the country. And the top not 1%, but 1/10 of 1% own as much wealth as the bottom 90%. That is an extreme amount of inequality in a country which has always billed itself as, you know, the hallmark of democracy and opportunity for everybody. So we have rapidly pushed ourselves into becoming much more like a what we used to call third world country, because we have made so many decisions that allow for that concentration of wealth. And we cannot address climate change without also addressing the fair distribution of resources on every level. So that third effort there is the one that may cause a bit of trouble, but I think is key to addressing this problem. 2 years ago, at the big International Permaculture Convergence in England, some of us were involved in a climate change working group that came out of the next step process that had started in Cuba. In Cuba, people got the idea that when we get together with all these permaculturalists, maybe we should do more than just talks and workshops and sharing, as important as all of that is. Maybe we should also think about doing some organizing and figuring out how we can organize around these larger problems. So many working groups came out of that, and in England we had many sessions of getting people together. And one of them was a climate change working group. And one of the questions we asked is, again, is there an approach to climate change that we as permaculturalists hold in common, that we could maybe not all agree on, because probably we will never all agree on anything, but where we could, you know, the majority of us, a lot of us could agree. And we wrote a statement which is being handed out to you. And I'm not going to read the whole thing right now, but there should be enough copies that everyone here can get one, and I encourage you to take it home and read it. Because it turns out that, yes, there is an approach that we can reach common agreement on. And at the convergence, something like 600 people from hundreds of different permaculture groups and many, many, many countries signed on to the statement. And since then, it's been up on website where hundreds more groups have signed on to it. And one of the things that we wanted to make clear, again, I think is one of the important contributions of permaculture, which is that we look at things in terms of systems, not in terms of single, flashy answers or one great piece of new technology. So we said human-caused climate change is a crisis of systems, ecosystems and social systems, and must be addressed systemically. No single new technology or blanket solution will solve the problem. We're looking at patterns, relationships, flows, linking solutions together into synergistic strategies that work with nature and fit local conditions, terrains, and cultures. So that, I think, is the second thing that we as permaculturalists need to be beating the drums for and, screeching into people's ears. It's like systems, systems, systems. Because the world is full of people who don't think in systems and who don't think in terms of life and biology and who are madly in love with flashy new forms of technology, in part because they help with that increase in concentration of wealth and power. And if we don't push for the systems thinking, then we are going to end up with piecemeal individual solutions that don't actually fit together and work. A few months ago, I have a wonderful stepdaughter whose name is Juanita Schlepfer, who's now living in Switzerland, and she did a project for the Swiss government where they put together a climate change garden in Zurich, and she's brought it to California, to San Francisco, where I live. And there was a big series of talks to inaugurate the garden, and at one of them, someone came and talked to us from Silicon Valley, from the world of high tech, and he was all excited because someone has now invented a machine to take what we can do as permaculturalists, thinking in terms of systems and thinking in terms of biological solutions. I think we all know that the permaculture approach is let's regenerate ecosystems and do that using plants to build soil and to restore the health and the life of the land that we live on, of the water systems, all of those systems. So when we think systemically, we can frame the climate change problem not as, how many units of carbon do we take out of the atmosphere, though that's important, or put into the atmosphere, which is what we're still doing, but rather to say climate change is a measure of massive ecosystem degeneration around the world. It shows itself in different ways, in different places. In some places it looks like desertification. In some places it might look like massive soil erosion. In some places it might be drought. In some places it might be floods. In some places it might be wildfires. But it is basically a symptom that the Earth's ecosystems and their resilience is under assault and is no longer functioning to maintain that ecosystem health. I think if we frame climate change in that way, it gives us a hopeful answer to what to do about it. Because then the answer is massive ecosystem regeneration on a global scale. And the good news is we know how to do that. How many people in this room right now that imagines the world in the future and different possibilities for it. So for me, thinking about the stories we tell is always very key to how we approach any kind of problem or any kind of project. And again, this may be very, very different. I'm really aware I'm speaking very much out of the first world USA perspective, where right now our big problem is that we have a government in office who seems to have decided that reality actually isn't important. It's not even about climate change denial. It's about like basic levels of human sanity and decency. And I think actually in places like India, people are much smarter and much more aware because you're still actually in touch with the real world and what's going on. But I know at home when we are trying to organize around climate change, people either deny it or they start telling the stories of doom and gloom. And a lot of people I meet, a lot of young people, are disheartened, are depressed, don't know what to do because they feel like there's no solution, there's no answer to the problem, it is too big for them. When we tell the story of climate change, we often tell it in a framework of personal sacrifice. You should, stop shopping. Well, that's obviously not what you want to tell subsistence farmers because shopping is not their problem. That is what we have to tell the more affluent middle class. But the affluent middle class is so squeezed right now that they no longer feel affluent. And telling them to stop shopping is like telling people who feel like the ground is being sliding away from them that they should just stop sliding. They don't, it does not connect to them. It just makes people feel guilty and wrong and bad, and then they tend to resist it. It's actually in some ways a very fundamentalist religious framework. It's like saying this is your, you're like primal guilt and you should, do restitution for it. You should make penance for it. And again, I think that might in some ways be fair. Certainly those of us who benefit from the ways that overdevelopment has created this problem should be willing to address it and give something up. But what I think we need to be telling people is a different story. It really came home to me when we had a visit to Aranya Farm and were able to see the amazing work that Natsana is doing there. And some of the women farmers came and they sang to us the songs they made up about permaculture and told their stories. And I looked at that and I went, you know, there is no reason why we cannot live in a world where everybody has enough to eat, where farmers are empowered, where they are singing with joy about the beauty of creating these wonderful systems. There is actually nothing stopping us. It does not require us to dress in gray and stand in long bread lines and eat nothing but gruel, you know. All it requires sacrificing is what Vandana Shiva calls that poison industrial complex. That's what we need to sacrifice. Not your comfort, not your ability to have a beautiful home, not your time with your children, which is what we're sacrificing now. We need to sacrifice the profits of those who are benefiting from the poison system. And I think it's really vital that we start to actually frame the problem that way. You know, our personal choices are important. What we eat, what we wear, what light bulbs we have. But our personal choices alone are not going to solve the problem. And focusing on our personal choices, I think, is part of our particularly like American cultural bent to personalize everything and make you believe that you are simultaneously responsible alone for everything and immensely more powerful than you actually are. But it also, you know, they're important because your personal choices give you a sense of integrity and align you with your values. But in order to solve this problem, we need collective action. We need political action. We need strategizing. And that sometimes might involve doing something like flying to a conference like this, rather than staying home and reducing my carbon footprint. So, in our framework, again, we talked about framing climate change as ecosystem degeneration. And I think the stories that we need to share with people are these hopeful stories, and there are so many of them, about ecosystem regeneration. Because so many people out there, city dwellers, I think, all over the world, have no idea that that is even possible. People are so disconnected from the earth. I mean, among other things, our permaculture group has worked with kids in the inner city in San Francisco. And I remember, you know, we had a program where we were working with girls who live in public housing to work in the garden and grow food in the garden. And the idea is they could grow food, the food will help improve their health, their families can have vegetables and stuff, and they'll get paid a little bit to do it. And at one time saying to one of the girls, okay, look, I brought a big salad bowl, we're going to harvest this stuff and we're going to make a big salad and eat it. And she looked at me in absolute horror. She said, well, we ain't going to eat the shit that grew in the garden. That grew in the dirt. And I realized she was not alone in that. That we have a generation who has no idea that their food grows in the dirt. We have kids growing up in the city who have no idea that their fast food McDonald's actually comes somewhere around the world. Behind that hamburger once was a living cow. So we are talking to people who are basically, they may have PhDs in this and that, they may be making money left and right on the stock market, they may be working in the tech industry, they are ecologically illiterate. So we need basic ecological education on a mass scale if we're going to do massive ecological regeneration. And the first thing people need to know is, yes, this is possible. It's being done all over the world. So we need to really tell these stories and make these stories front and center. The second thing I think we need to do is exactly what we're already doing. I mean, we saw that just about everybody in this room is already doing something. So for that kind of organizing, I think what we need to do is figure out, are there ways we can better connect and support one another and share with one another and share resources with one another. Again, some of that process we began at some of the earlier IPCs. There's a process called the CoLab process, which is going on, and Andy Goldring has produced some wonderful postcards about it, which will be at registration and also at Robin Clayfield's booth out in the area where all the stalls are. But the idea is, you know, we are doing this incredible work. Let's find ways we can coordinate it. Let's find ways we can link together, not just when we get together a couple times a year, every couple of years, but throughout the time, and figure out ways that we can support one another, again, to tell these stories, to get them known, to help people get the resources they need, and to help all of us scale up what we're doing. Because this is a good time, whatever you are doing, to think about what is the next scale up. If you're doing a homestead, can you scale that up to your community? If you have a home garden, can you expand that out to your neighborhood or to your school or to some institution that you work with? If you are working with your little permaculture group, is there a way that you can connect to the officials in your town and think about changing some of the regulations that might be in your way, or finding support to help spread these programs further? Again, we are all already doing that. Let's just support each other to take it the next step and take it further. Robin Francis said something wonderful at the training before this that I really liked. She said, I'm not trying to mainstream permaculture. I'm trying to permaculture up the mainstream. And that, I think, is something that we need to be doing, because many of us may be comfortable, even happy, as sort of edge species. Existing in those creative ecotones outside the centers of power and don't really want to have a lot to do with them. But if we're going to make these massive transformations, then the things that we're doing that are wild and creative and radical have to become the norm, and they have to become the mainstream. And that has to happen relatively fast, not just in 100 years from now. So one of the things we have to think about is, what is permaculture's relationship with officialdom? Some of us, like I said, like to just go outside of it and do our own things. But sometimes those things can actually make changes. There is a wonderful place on Vancouver Island called OUR Eco Village, where I am fortunate enough to teach at PDC every year. And the woman, Brandy Gallagher, who is one of the founders, has done a tremendous job of working with their local officials so that they have all these amazingly beautiful straw bale and natural buildings and cob buildings and gray water systems, and they have gotten them all permitted and legalized, which is very unusual in Canada and the United States. And Brandy has a saying about working with officials. She says, we always believe that a no is just an uneducated yes. So one of the things we can do is educate the officials in our world. The other thing we can think about doing is becoming them. You know, it was exciting to hear people who've been in the Ministry of Agriculture and hear that those people are behind these programs. When I heard some of you, again, this may not be for everybody, but for some of you, maybe the path is to think about, how do I actually take a position where I can wield some of that power? And that might be running for office. It might be, again, in California, where I live, in the United States, there are many, many little offices that don't require huge amounts of money. There are things like, you know, the Board of Transportation or the Water Board. But I'll tell you something, the Water Board in many, many cities and counties is what actually controls development. And sometimes you can just get yourself appointed to it or volunteer on it. Running for something like your city council or your local town council or organizing your women's network or whatever can be ways, you know, because eventually we have to not just educate the officials, but we want people who have permaculture education and thinking in those positions of officialdom. The other thing that we need to also do is to look at the successes beyond our own successes, but look at the things that have gone well and be talking about them and pointing them out, because you know, in California, again, there's a place called Village Homes. It's a housing development that was done in the late 70s, early 80s. And it was done with the permaculture principles of the time, and has water catchment for all the rain that falls, and swales, and it has pedestrian streets and gardens, and a lot of thought to the ecology of it. And it has been a resounding success on every single level, including just sheer basic profit making and economics. So you look at that and go, so why aren't there hundreds of thousands of village homes? Why is this still the one thing we look at as the example, instead of saying, oh, well, this is so successful, now it's the norm? We need to make those things the norm, and part of that, again, is making sure people know that they do exist and they are possible. We also need to really find ways to stop the destruction, because it is moving so fast and so quickly. You know, right before this, I was at the talk about Fukushima, and it's heartbreaking, because I think it is all of our nightmare that we do all this great work, we build soil, we create these beautiful things, we make a paradise, and then something happens that is completely out of our control, that destroys it and poisons it and makes it impossible to live with. So we need to be involved also in those movements that are saying stop. And they're saying, no, we have to stop the pipelines, we have to stop the new nuclear power plants, and don't let any so-called environmentalists tell you we need nuclear power to deal with climate change. If you hear that, just ask them first if they can find the missing fuel from Fukushima and figure out what to do with it. Then we can even begin discussing more nuclear power plants. Until they can do that, there is no possible excuse for promoting this technology that creates poisons and toxins that persist for tens of thousands of years that we have no idea how to clean up. But we need... And I'm sorry, but I've been an anti-nuclear activist again since the 70s. The pleasure of saying I told you so is no measure against the absolute pain and tragedy of seeing the incredible destruction that has happened. So we really, really, really need to stop these things. We really need to push, and I think some of the most successful approaches to undermining the power of the poison cartel is the divestment movement, getting countries and organizations and individuals to pull their money out of financing these things. That's one of the things that the people from Standing Rock did, along with their blockade to stop the pipeline. They started a very successful movement to get people to divest from all the corporations that were part of funding it and financing it. It's also one of the things that helped bring down apartheid in South Africa. It's a technique that has been used in many, many places. It's being successful now in helping to undermine some of the companies that are supporting the illegal Israeli occupation in Palestine, and it's a very powerful tool that we can all use. Vandana Shiva talked about some of the organizing here that has stopped some of the seed grabs and the land grabs and the power grabs of Monsanto and the chemical corporations. And again, that is part of something that we as permaculturalists need to be involved in and support because, again, those are the things that can undermine all the good work that we do. I have been an activist for a long time, and one of the things that we have often done is to show up at something like Standing Rock or a demonstration or a mobilization and bring permaculture there. So, I always like to tell the story in Cancun when we were protesting the World Trade Organization, who was trying to put in agricultural rulings that would have devastated farmers all over the world, even worse than they're already being devastated. We had a permaculture group that came to do we ended up setting up like a hand washing station that used gray water and treated it and collected rainwater to create some place where people could wash before they ate. And I remember having it set up for about 5 minutes, and one of the campesino women came over because people had come to camp for this from all over Mexico, farm workers and students, and looked at it and said, "Oh, we don't have running water in our village. We can't afford the pumps, but this, I had a little pump made from a bicycle wheel. This would work." So I think we do need to say no, but that no is always stronger when it goes with a yes. When we can somehow bring into the saying no a vision and a demonstration of what we're saying yes to, and when we know what we're saying yes to. And I think the climate movement in Europe has been very influenced by some of our permaculture students to create things like gray water systems and climate camps and set them up on permaculture principles. I think when we train activists in permaculture, we are training some of the people who have the most motivation to change the world and the most heart and courage to do it. And they're not always going to be on the front lines. Like, none of us can spend our entire lives there. They're going to have to go home, plant their gardens, do their other things, build their communities. And I have seen enormous things grow out of some of the work we've done in bringing those things to action. And finally, I think permaculture has a great capacity to mitigate the impact of climate change by helping people who are refugees, by developing ways that we can respond to disaster. And I know Ro Morrow has been talking about that. A lot of work is going on around that. I think that's a really key part of how we can organize. So I'll just say, what we've done with this climate change statement is we created a website. People can go there, I think it's on the statement, and sign on to it. People were able to bring it to the COP21 talks in Paris. In Paris, the hopeful thing was that soil and mitigation are now being talked about and are part of what's in the air, at least, around responding to climate change. And in California, California, unlike the rest of the United States, actually has very good legislation about climate change, and that includes support for mitigation through improving and building soil. And we can continue to do more of that. We have a working group that's looking at putting on a website where people will be able to go there and find a whole range of permaculture climate change solutions and look at other solutions people propose through a permaculture lens so that individuals or policymakers who want to know what to do can have a centralized place to look for that information. And we're looking at developing ongoing training programs, in, again, the United States, Canada, Europe, many places, something like half the farmland is due to change hands in the next 10, 20 years because farmers are aging out. And I think it's desperately important we think about organizing to get that land, to hold on to that land and turn it into regenerative systems rather than letting it fall into some of the mechanized corporate things that Vandana Shiva was talking about and that are already destroying the world. So just to close, I want to say I am actually very hopeful about climate change. I think for us as permaculturalists it can be a great springboard to doing the things that are going to regenerate and help people's lives on every single level. And I am very hopeful when I look around and see the work that people are doing here. When I think of those beautiful women singing with such joy about their farms and their seeds and their plants and their permaculture principles, I believe that we can do anything and that we actually can regenerate the world. So I think we have a little time for questions. Thank you.
So it's almost 1 o'clock, but we all know there's going to be a long line, so we can spend some time together to answer questions. So if folks have any questions for Starhawk? Can I ask a question?
Madam, can permaculture take us into the heaven? Will it take us into the heaven?
Heaven?
Will permaculture take us into the heaven?
Will permaculture take us into heaven, or paradise? I think it has the potential at least to create a heaven on earth. Which might not be, I mean, you know, we will never live in a perfect world. We will always have people who annoy us and, you know, things that don't go right. And you know, there are plenty of natural disasters even without climate change. But I think that permaculture can take us into a world where we live in communities that support one another, that are dedicated to regenerating and repairing their environments, that honor the wisdom of the indigenous peoples of the land and the traditions and the things that have, in so many places, provided a kind of a long-term, if not permanent, agriculture, and where people can live lives where they can be healthy and where they can have time to spend with friends and with family, where they can be creative, and where we can use technology to connect us with the wonderful art and culture and creativity of people around the world. And I believe that is entirely possible.
I have a question, please. How does permaculture distinguish itself from other systems of agriculture by taking the advantage of this excess carbon due to climate change and earn credits to the practitioners of this permaculture and earn credit and then as well as provide as a sink to the whole world, carbon sink to the whole world. I mean, whoever are destructing or damaging, you know, or polluting the nature from the nature's theory.
I think that permaculture is in alliance with a lot of other systems. In some ways, permaculture is just a name, and you know, I don't think when we organize we have to necessarily always be attached to that name. But I do think that permaculture as both an approach and as a global movement has some specific things to offer. So I would say that permaculture is about design. So it's about taking a set of core ethics and principles that apply in many different systems and using them to figure out what's going to work best in your situation. It's not actually any specific technique. although there are many techniques that we teach. But it's really the approach of looking, trying to understand how nature does things and working in the same way. It draws from a lot of indigenous and traditional systems, but it isn't any one indigenous system. It draws from science and technology, and there's a lot of discussion in the permaculture movement now about needing to get our science better documented and be more rigorous in some of the claims. One of the problems they've had implementing it is figuring out how do they measure carbon and how do they measure success. There's also things called the National Resource Conservation Service often has grants. And come talk to me afterwards and we can talk more about that.
So we'll take one last question before we close up.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm right here. Hi. Hi. I want to know about someone my age and how they can get into permaculture and activism.
Well, I would say first take a permaculture design course if you haven't already done that. You know, the project I'm working on right now is to develop a longer-term training program in regenerative farming and ranching that would use the open badge system that's being developed through the CoLab process, which is a system where there'll be a website where you could go do something like, say, come to this conference, and you'd be able to get a badge for it, like a Boy Scout badge. And it would all be kept on a website. You'd take a course in something like water harvesting and management, and you could get a badge for that. And out of that, we could develop a curriculum that would say, okay, when you've done this, and that, you would be eligible for some internships where you could go and practice. Because much as I love teaching PDCs, I don't believe you can learn to do permaculture without actually doing it. And the best way is to be able to have some time to practice with someone who's already doing it well. And at the end of this whole process, we try to work together with land trusts and with other groups that have land available so that you could get access to land and be able to have a place where you start putting that into practice. So that's what I'm working on for young people. I also think there are a lot of other paths. For some people, I know we talked about unschooling, and I think that can be great. But I also think for some people going into academia might be important because we do need to get that research and we do need to get people in those positions who have that, degree behind them. For some people, just finding someone you can apprentice with or finding someone who needs help. Again, the situation I'm sure is really, really different in many other places, but all over the United States and Europe, there are lots of aging farmers and people who have land, who don't have kids who want to take it over, who really need someone young and strong to give them a hand. And that can be one way of just getting on the land and doing it. If we have time, I'd love to hear just one question from a woman. Yeah.
How is permaculture addressing the collective insanity caused by psychological issues, nature-culture divide, the falsely conditioned ego?
You couldn't ask like a little question. I think permaculture is one of the great answers to the nature-culture divide because, again, it has that framework that says human beings are we are part of nature. We're not actually separate from nature. And if we recognize that and get good at it and work in the way nature works, then again we can have a healing impact on the world instead of a destructive impact. And I think a lot of that environmental, human beings are evil, actually comes out of that nature-culture split. Which to me is a very false split that has certain historical and philosophical roots. I think there's more talk in permaculture about bringing the spirit back in. Bill Mollison was very wary of that, I think, because he felt like anything too woo-woo would undermine permaculture's credibility. But I think we're in a state now where if you don't have some kind of spiritual faith in something, it's really kind of hard to hold your head up in the morning and read the news. So I'm going to be talking about that at the Convergence, but I think there's a lot more openness and a lot more recognition that, saving seed is a sacred act. Building soil is an act of worship and love and devotion. Making compost, can be an amazing alchemical ritual of transformation. So it's not that we have to do different things even. Sometimes it's just if we shift our attitude and our understanding about what we're already doing and realizing, we have this tremendous privilege of getting to work with the great creative and regenerative forces of the universe every single day in clear and manifest ways, then I think permaculture becomes something that is spiritually renewing as well as physically regenerative.
Do you think with permaculture we can feed this world?
Sorry?
Do you think how many years we will, within how many years we can feed this world with this permaculture? Because very low yielding, that's why the problem.
I don't know. I mean, I can't put a number on it, but I know at the press conference I heard Vandana Shiva saying, her vision and the other people who were there in the conference is that by 2047, by the 100th anniversary of independence, India will be entirely chemical-free and poison-free. I think that is a worthy goal. I think we can work toward that goal in other places as well. I think the wonderful thing about regenerative systems is they can move amazingly quickly. Like Clea was talking about building soil in 3 weeks. Especially in the tropics, they can move really quickly. In temperate areas, we do regenerative, holistic management grazing on our land, and you can start to see improvements, in a season. It doesn't necessarily take decades and decades. So I think that things can turn around very quickly. And they need to turn around very quickly. And in the end, I actually believe that nature is resilient and nature is conscious and wants to work with us. And that if we shift and work with her, then there are tremendous forces of resilience that come into play.
So thank you so much, Starhawk, for all of the sharing and taking of questions, really pushing alongside the working on the land to organize, to create, and to really connect and share everything that we're talking about here, because it's important to think about what happens after the conference. Who do we keep maintaining relationships with in terms of land, in terms of our social circles? So thank you for reminding us of that.
I will do this. I will put out at the registration table a sheet. So if people want to sign on to the statement, you can either go to the website or you could leave a clear, contact on that sheet. If there's anyone else who's interested in the ongoing permaculture organizing, we're going to do some of that at the Convergence. But if you're not going to be at the Convergence, you could also write that on that sheet of paper. So put Starhawk's contact sheet on there, and we can carry this on.
Thanks again. So I just was informed there are a lot of folks online, so if folks want to continue a little bit of a conversation. I know from the last the last talk with Manish, we talked a lot about deschooling. So connecting deschooling, organizing, bringing up the issues of decolonization. If there are folks who want to stay for another 15 minutes or so before waiting online, there's a lot of folks waiting for lunch. So in terms of using our time, we can do that. If folks want to either move forward or come sit together here on the stage to have that conversation, it's open if you folks want to rest. Does anybody want to continue a conversation on decolonization, deschooling, organizing? Yeah, please come up, or do you want to do it in seats, or? So if anyone wants to come up. I'm down to talk with folks. We can do an exercise together if you like. Otherwise, folks can just sit and relax and engage with each other, exchange emails.